to get the book. Looks like copies abound, but there's still a few in the bookstore. We'll be open maybe for a few minutes after tonight to sell them if you didn't have a chance to pick it up beforehand. Just by a quick show of hands, since we didn't have our Sunday service, how many of you were able to listen to the most amazing Dharma talk?
I mean, it was mind-blowing.
It was mind-blowing. All right, so just a few of you. So I'll probably just talk a little bit about what the Dharma talk was about and then open up to tonight's reading, and then we'll sort of, I think, maybe take a little time to, for those of you that have read the text for this evening, since we had that out, I'll maybe take some comments about that, but then we're going to kind of break into some smaller groups for a short period of time. But, so, the Dharma talk that I gave was on Milarepa's The Hunter and the Deer, which is a poetic song. But part of the story that I told on Sunday was explaining who Milarepa actually was. And I asked Andrea today, I'm like, did I tell too many stories in the Dharma talk? And she's like, no, that was good, because I told the Milarepa story and then I told the Hunter and the Deer story. But I do want to talk a little bit about who Milarepa was, because I think that, for me, he's been an inspiring figure in Tibetan Buddhism for a number of reasons. And his story is oftentimes one of sin, redemption, definitely perseverance, discipline with the path, and a dedication to Buddha's life. And so I've always loved his story. Kind of a shorthand version of it, Milarepa grew up in a fairly wealthy family. It was father, mother, he had a sister, and they had servants. But that soon changed, and when he was 7 years old, his father died, got ill and died. And in his father's will, it was put forth that Milarepa's uncle and aunt would take care of Milarepa, his mom, and his sister. And then when Milarepa came of age, at about 15 or 16, the wealth would be bestowed to him. Well, his uncle and aunt didn't follow those wishes, and soon took all of the wealth and began to lavish themselves with it, and actually turned Milarepa and his sister and mother into their servants. Well, Milarepa's mother got pretty resentful about that whole thing, and she, over the course of a number of years, convinced Milarepa to begin to practice black magic so that he could seek revenge for their family. And so Milarepa, being a dutiful son, learned black magic, and when he became 15 years old, his aunt and uncle were having a banquet, and they invited a number of guests. It was a wedding feast. And during that wedding feast, Milarepa practiced black magic, wiped out the entire family, and threatened to destroy all the crops of the village with a terrific hailstorm. And it was at the point when he was about ready to destroy the crops that he kind of felt a tinge of regret about what he had just done, killing 35 people. And at that point he said, I think I need to purify myself, and the only way I can really do that is through Buddhism. So he went out and he sought teachers along the way, and the first teacher that he found said, I can't really help you, but if you're going to find anybody who's going to be able to help you with your situation, it's Marpa the translator, who was well known in Tibetan circles as being a master. And so Marpa commanded Milarepa to build a giant tower at the edge of his property. And so Milarepa built the tower, and then he said, okay, now I want you to tear it down, and then I want you to build it again. And Milarepa was like, okay. So he did it, and he told him to tear it down again. And this happened 4 times. And each time, Milarepa would just sort of seethe a little bit, but he'd go do it dutifully, and at the same time he would ask Marpa, like, can you give me some teachings here? Like, I don't understand this. And Marpa was like, just go build a tower and then come back. He was driven to the point of almost suicide when Milarepa finally conceded. And so he started giving him the teachings. And at one point during the story of Milarepa's life, he went back home to his mom's village and saw her burned out home had been destroyed, and her bones were there. And at that point, it was almost like this sudden moment of inspiration where Milarepa said, "Oh my God, I understand impermanence at a whole new level." And he ran back to Marpa, and Marpa saw just how much he had changed, and he began to give him teachings. And during that time, he moved up to the Himalayan caves and meditated in hermitages and began to sing and write poetry about his life. And during that time in the caves is when he wrote most of the songs that Milarepa is known for, including the one that we're going to talk about tonight. I think it was a fairly sad, I don't know if it's sad, Milarepa died. He was older, and one of his students poisoned him, I think was the part of the story. And he knew it was coming, but he was willing to let go of his life at that point and passed away. So that's Milarepa. The hunter and the deer. Another show of hands. We aren't going to put down that you guys didn't do your homework, but how many of you guys were able to read this digitally? So that's great. Okay, good. So we have a pretty good understanding of the story of Milarepa and what takes place, and especially if you listen to the Dharma talk, you know the story. And I think that one of the things that I love about this story in particular, and Milarepa's life in general, is the idea that you can be a pretty broken individual and still come to the practice and find redemption. And you can come to the practice full of fear and this desire to escape, like the deer shows up to him. And through listening to the Dharma, you find peace. Or you can come to the Dharma like the dog did, with this anger and greed and ill will and this ravenous need to kill that deer and be pacified by it, you know. And I love that part of the story. And then obviously the hunter taking this human form of the two previous beasts, I guess, that showed up at his cave, and his willingness to see the Dharma. I loved it. I think it's in the first part of this that in the introduction there's this great line of how they tell of this story. They say, this account infers that the natural world responds in some mysterious way to human intention and morality. And I just love that idea of how this story is told. And I think it was even part of, something along those lines was part of the link on the webpage as well, that when we show up with compassion, with this reverence for life, that the world will respond in a really interesting way. And so I don't want to sit here and talk. I want us to be able to break out, but I want to hear from you guys as to parts of the story that spoke to you. That the great thing about the reading itself is I summarized in the Dharma talk, and I did that this evening for us just for time's sake, the poetic verses that he speaks of. If there's one or two of those that sticks out to you, I would just love to hear from you guys for a couple of minutes about this reading in particular, but if another one spoke to you, I'm open to hearing about that as well.
I like the fact how the hunter had a very preconceived notion of Milarepa. kind of just like, oh, these yogis and their cave dwelling, like he very much had that kind of idea going into the cave. And then it was just like, Milarepa, like, chill out, man, just have a seat, let me sing you a song. To me, that cracks me up. It's like, hey, I know you're going to try to shoot me with an arrow, but instead, relax, you missed, just have a seat. I'm going to sing you a song, calm me down, kill me later.
Yeah, you have plenty of time.
Yeah, plenty of time. And then he, through that process, even the hunter was kind of transformed by it. So yeah, that just.
Well, I think
I got to take out of that part of the story.
At first in the story, he's not even convinced he's a yogi. He thinks he's still practicing this black magic. Because how could he cause this deer and this dog to lie together right next to him? It has to be black magic.
I think Milarepa's willingness to let the hunter figure it out for himself, instead of when the hunter comes running up with all his fearsomeness, and instead of Milarepa being like, whoa, dude, whoa, he let him take a shot at him without, and accepting the circumstances as they were, without it, causing him to pause or shake his resolve or awareness or view. All of that took place, and because of that, that was enough to cause the hunter to have pause and then be open to hear the song afterwards. I think oftentimes, I know for myself, my own reactivity to a strong stimuli like that, I have to take responsibility for that aspect of the interaction as well sometimes, as opposed to letting the hunter just work it out for themselves to a point where they can be open to the idea in the first place. If he tried a preemptive strike in the circumstance, then that probably wouldn't have resulted in the same outcome. That was, just reading it, that was the part that, it doesn't say anything about him doing any kind of magic or anything to protect himself. It was the hunter missing on his own accord, which was part of his own realization at that point that maybe there's something else going on here.
I think something stood out for me, and it was you kind of paraphrasing or quoting from Milarepa in your Dharma talk about to slay this deer will never please you, when Milarepa's addressing the hunter. To slay this deer will never please you, but if you kill the 5 poisons within, all your wishes will be fulfilled. And it spoke to me because it kind of reminds me of something that early on in my Dharma path I learned that felt very true to me, which was essentially when you're chasing all the desires, wherever you go, it's like drinking salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you're going to get. You're not fulfilling your, these chasing these desires aren't fulfilling anything with you. But right away the flip to, kill the poisons within and all your wishes will be fulfilled. I just like how that is phrased, and I mean, it's very true for me too. So it kind of sums up a lot of what we're going for. So yeah, I appreciated that line.
Yeah, that idea of it's an inside job. Like, it doesn't matter what those external things are, they're never going to quell whatever that desire, hatred, whatever it is,
Yeah, it's all taming your mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. We can go home now.
Nailed it. Others. So this section is known as Reverence for Life, and so I kind of always do this when I think I know what a word means, like I have an idea what reverence means, but like what does it really mean, like how do I put that word into like my daily life? I have an idea. But so I go to the dictionary, and I like to look up other things that go with it. And reverence is actually broken down into both a noun and a verb. The noun is a deep respect for someone or something, which I get that, you know, I hold somebody in high esteem or respect, acclaim, admiration. Like, I understand those pretty well. And I think that this is where this class and this challenge actually comes into play, is when I was looking at the verb for that. And this is kind of what our assignment within this group is going to be, because I kind of need help for this myself, I think. The verb, regard or treat with deep respect. But to have high opinion of, to hold in high regard, hold in high esteem, think much of, approve of, cherish, value, prize, treasure, look up to. These verbs are what I'm really sort of struck by. Like, how do I walk through my daily life looking up to life? What practices am I doing that hold life in a high esteem? What am I actually doing? What actions am I taking? And I think that that's part of this path of the Bodhisattva that we talk about, right? Is that we want to alleviate the suffering for all sentient beings. But what is that actually tangibly like in regards to reverence for life? And so that's going to be we're going to break into smaller groups. How many do we have? 2, 6, 8, 20 of us? So let's do 4 groups of 5, and we'll just break into the 4 corners of the room here. We'll count off by 4s, and we'll go around, and we'll just sit in groups for a little while to think about, like, what tangible actions does something like reverence for life mean? Because like I said, I think I know, but how do I actually do that on a daily basis? What things can we do over this next week as a part of this block to show reverence for life? All right. So I'm just going to read something that was in this section, how Bodhisattvas serve sentient beings, before we go around. And this is on page 31. This is the Huayan Sutra, and it's the second paragraph, the first full paragraph. And it says, in these ways that a bodhisattva should benefit all sentient beings without discrimination. Why? Because if a bodhisattva accommodates all sentient beings as such, he is then making sincere offerings to all Buddhas. If he respects and serves sentient beings, he is paying respect and giving service to all the Tathagatas, thank you. If he makes sentient beings happy, he is making all Tathagatas happy. Why? Because the essence of Buddhahood consists in great compassion. Because of sentient beings, a great compassion is aroused. Because of a great compassion, the thought of enlightenment is aroused. Because of the thought of enlightenment, supreme Buddhahood is achieved. And that stuck with me as far as like, okay, so the idea is to just keep coming back to this idea of compassion, like great compassion for all sentient beings. Anyway, I would love to hear from each of the groups as to what actions do we take to show reverence?
We decided we needed to have coffee in the morning. So we start off on the right path.
Coffee and meditation.
Check.
Coffee and meditation.
Clear action.
Clear action step. If you're not doing it, you should start.
Right.
Coffee, meditation, maybe at the same time. I don't know.
But at least that's the beginning towards.
That's all right. We're good with that.
But that gets me to thinking about, are we being conscious of where we're getting our coffee from? And the people we're getting our coffee from. You know, that idea of reverence for life, you know? I've been fortunate and very blessed to spend a fair amount of time in Guatemala and to see how some people are treated for a bean of coffee versus other people. And not to disparage Starbucks too harshly, but there is a plantation lifestyle, for lack of a better word, that exists down there for the benefit of our $7 lattes. You know, so is this an action we can take if we think about where did that coffee bean come from? Not to dampen everybody's morning coffee, I love it too, but you know, I mean, these are the things that I think that I know I have to think about. And there's a reason why I don't go to Starbucks. And before I went to Guatemala, I didn't mind going to Starbucks. But I finally found the source of where that coffee comes from. That smells pretty good in that place, and it stinks to me now. So anyway.
Where do you get your coffee?
I told you that fish coffee. We've had this conversation about my own coffee.
To come on the upside of that, you have a list of ethically sourced coffee that we
Okay, so remember we talked about things that we were going to put together? A resource page. We are going to get that on there as part of the resource page before we leave. Ethically sourced coffee.
It's a beautiful day. The store on Broadway.
Yeah, the Broadway store, they have ethically sourced coffee up there.
It's called It's a Beautiful Day.
It's a beautiful day.
What about roastery?
I don't know. I have problems with the roaster. I have other problems with the roaster.
Maybe we have to ask.
Most of the coffee that we buy, you know, like if we are making our own or grinding our beans or whatever, you know, it's going to tell you where it comes from, and if it does ethical treatment, they're going to let you know because they want to sell their thing.
Mm-hmm. But I will give a list. I think we had talked about sort of putting stuff out on a listserv during the week. I will put that out by this week sometime. I will put it out.
Maybe you should just take a caffeine pill.
Tea still, yes.
We are so lucky to have some great resources here in Kansas City for ethically sourced things and sustainable things. And if anybody's on Facebook, which is other story, right, about Reverence for Life, but there's a group called Zero Waste Kansas City. You don't have to feel intimidated that you have to be zero waste to be on it, but it's a great place if you ask. There's so many people on there that know these things already. Like I have a whole trunk full of styrofoam because, you know, what can you do with styrofoam? Well, they knew where to recycle it in Kansas City, so we'll go in there and recycle it. So also there's a website called The Resilient Activist, and it has tons and it has all these resources in Kansas City where you can get sustainable things and alternative use things that can help protect the environment. But we were talking about how just by the fact of being alive, you know, we destroy things, we consume things, and so the sky's the limit in what you might choose to pay attention to. You know.
Another great site is Life Without Plastic. It's like gives actionable things to do. She's making her own toothpaste. Other part, I mean, we stopped you at coffee, but...
Yeah, no, I'm done. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for showing me.
Going back to bed.
Other group members, group one members, like to share anything that stuck out. Just coffee and meditation?
We talked about practicing kindness and compassion and appreciating nature.
Yeah, Nora had a great, talked about the Philippines. You want to share that one?
Yeah, I was telling the group that since since living in Alaska, I have a greater appreciation for nature. You know, it's like when your high is minus 33. You know, if your car breaks down, there's like within 2 minutes somebody is there to help you because you could freeze to death. But it's given me a greater appreciation for the life around that we do not see. And in the Asian cultures, like in the Philippines, when you pass a big tree, you ask for permission to pass, or an anthill. And so...
But those are only if they're inhabited by spirits, right?
Well, I mean, how do you know that this anthill is not inhabited by spirit?
Right, but the idea is they are inhabited by spirits.
Well, yeah, so that the appreciation for the life that we do not see, I mean, how wonderful would it be if we could perceive all of these living beings around us. You know, I'm sure they're watching us, they're guiding us, we just don't know. And so when I think about life, I now think about the bigger group of life.
Did you have something else to say?
Oh, and Glenn talked about like the being vigilant about living outside of your own head, like not being self-centered, basically being compassionate, like consider what the dog's not barking about and not just that it's not what you think it is. The dog's barking about, or for me not being irritated at the dog for barking.
What about group 2?
Oh, that would be me as the secretary. We talked a lot about respecting and showing compassion and understanding for all living things, animals, insects, things that irritate us, like ants in the summertime. Also part of reverence is reading, making yourself aware of just things that exist in life. Like one suggestion was to read about the intelligence of life, plant life and animal life. Let's see. Also being aware of one's actions and the effects of one's actions on others. Acknowledging the kindness of others, all those who have helped us or helped others, and all the ancestors who have lived and died and made all the Dharma, available for us to live better lives. Let's see. Not judging others, being aware of, one's own judgments, or just comparing ourselves to others instead of just recognizing the aliveness and intelligence of everyone. And expressing gratitude for life. Part of reverence was, waking up and, we've got our complaints and worries about what's going to happen during the day, but if we just stop and be, have gratitude that we are alive, that we made it through the night. We don't have any specific ones like
Drink coffee.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that covers it.
we're more airy-fairy kind of people. We think about the concept.
Should be our next remake bumper sticker. We're airy-fairy kind of people.
So it's just drink coffee and meditate. That would
That's the other one.
But all these concepts, all these ways of being, though, I think, will lead to what you're talking about of, being aware of how much plastic we're using and being aware of, just what we're doing on a daily basis. If anyone else in group number 2 has more that I missed, yeah.
It's almost, hearing it now, it's almost like it's
the attitude in which you should be doing these, action plans, these steps, like, drink coffee kindly or gently. And it's the kind of reframes the action to help, guide you in that direction.
We in group 4 have something along that lines, but we'll go to group 3 before we talk about that. What about group 3?
I can talk for us. We talked about a number of different things. I think it all kind of builds outwards from a similar sentiment of just recognizing and cherishing life in all forms, in all manners. And then we also looked at like nature itself, looking at like the wisdom that's inherent in nature, in trees, and the intelligence that trees have. I mean, a lot of what everyone's already shared, we kind of touched on similarly. And then we looked at some, like, both like the inner work that one could be doing in relationship to it, and then also like more pragmatically, like what are like some practical steps that you can be taking in one's life. That would be recognizing the truths that you're demonstrating and illustrating to yourself internally. So like an intentionality, we discussed like meat, animal agriculture, is there a proper way in which one can go about eating meat, and kind of discussed that. I don't know that we came to a strong conclusion on it. A lot of it was already said because a very kind of similar vein of thinking. You took some notes.
I did that. The first one I took was cherish every form of daily life. And the next one was cherish people when they are a pain in the butt.
That's where coffee comes in.
It all comes back to coffee.
And otherwise, I think it was a discussion on, finding out where our food is coming from, how it's being produced, like the coffee, how it's being produced. What about all these cattle farms that are methane gas, planting a tree. We talked quite a bit about trees and their wisdom, and how just planting a tree in your yard is going to help the environment. And there's so many things that we could do. One suggestion I thought was interesting is stop buying things we don't need, like clothes. Do we really need all the clothes we're buying? Can't we go to the thrift shop and pick up whatever? If we need a pair of socks, I'm sure there's some there.
Socks are not the best thing to get rid of. Really, they wear out, I've done a lot of thrift shop shopping.
Well, then you get
and there's some things that are really practical to get at a thrift shop.
Yes.
And there's some things that aren't.
Well, I was thinking you get a light bulb and then you darn the holes.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty tedious task too.
That's true.
And I spend a whole lot of time sewing, so.
Well, that.
I have a pretty good idea of what that takes.
Right.
But I'm just saying, if you want your feet to be comfortable, you got to buy socks.
Okay.
And hey, what's those great socks that you buy that benefit?
Bombas?
Yeah.
Where they give a pair to the homeless.
Uh-huh.
That would be something to put on the list.
I don't want to brag or anything.
But I think the point there is that the fashion industry is actually causing a lot of damage to the climate and our
disposable clothing.
And I think that's where we can make a choice. Do I really need 20 sweaters?
Yeah.
Yeah,
or
the-
patching jeans, bringing that back again rather than going out.
No problem there. Been doing it for years and years.
Has anybody seen the film, what was it, Big Little Farm?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was interesting because they show kind of that planting. This family bought some acreage in California, and the dirt was like hard, almost like rocky, just real desolate. And through their kind of this very, I wouldn't say like wild, but it was just like extremely diverse like farming techniques. Like within, I think, 7 years, the biodiversity of that land came back into balance. And it was like they were talking about, there was this huge rainstorm and it washed all the topsoil away except for their farm, because they had put down ground like grass and stuff like that held the soil. It was it's an amazing. Maybe we'll watch it during the Bodhisattva Challenge.
Well, I think that's a really important point. I mean, a lot of the conversation so far has been about, conserving, which is important, and we definitely need to step up, as a global community, but we've also have to acknowledge the fact that we've reached a point where there's almost irreparable damage, and that we've already hit this direction with climate change that it's past the point of skipping a pair of socks or not buying a pair of jeans. I mean, those things are still important, but we also need to look into things as far as regenerative practices, from technologically based carbon capture and solar energy and things like that. I mean, I think the individual responsibility that everybody has as far as conservation thing, those are things that we should take, very seriously, but equally as seriously, we have to realize that those steps are not going to fix where we're at. It has to be not just on an individual basis, but that we also have to be able to...
The biggest bang for your buck, I think, would be to become very politically active.
Yes,
because it's going to be politics.
Yeah, at this point, it has to be global systemic change. And that's, so focusing on being able to not just come up with ways that we can avoid damaging things worse on an individual basis, but also look into ways that we can come together as communities or as nations or as a global community and be able to start trying to actively reverse the damage that we have done. I feel like that's a very important thing. And I would be really interested to hear ways that on an individual level we can start doing those things.
I'm gonna make a shout out for the book that we read was it last spring or was it during the summer drawdown?
Which we have copies.
And we talked about it in our group, because that movement and that book are looking at these larger ideas of what we can actually do, not just politically, but culturally and socially, to change in drastic ways. And it's not just talking about stemming the tide, it's talking about reversing global warming. And it's really about 50 things that are really amazing. So that book is still in there. I'm sure
it's a great book.
Got 10 or 12 copies of it, but it's like, oh yeah.
But I think those things to happen, you need governmental support in order to really get off the ground. I think everybody needs to be working together. And right now we've got a government that's working completely the opposite direction, trying to create more problems. And that's hard to fight against.
It is. But when you find out that, we were just talking about this, for example, in the number one thing that could be done is limiting refrigerants and cooling off of the buildings that we exist in. And we don't need a government to change that, it would be cool if they did, but we can also say, hey, our office building is really cold. I want it, it doesn't have to be 68 degrees. It can be 72, and doing those things in our office can make a change in a lot of ways. I was kind of amazed when I read that book that, that was it, I thought it was something else. Cows or people driving too many diesel trucks. And that's on the list, but something like, oh, wow, we just cool the planet too much. And that's the ironic thing is, we've caused it to overheat,
Yeah.
and now the thing,
Cooling it.
yeah, now the thing that's killing us the quickest is cooling it. So,
Yeah.
I know we're running up against our time here. We have a couple minutes left. Group 4, I think that one of the things that was really interesting that kind of came out of our group was some of the stuff that was mentioned before, sort of this internal practice that we have to do and our own mindfulness practice of how we're, I love walking meditation because it's like just one foot in front of the other. But it reminds me of like, what am I doing at this moment? Am I letting the water run when it doesn't need to run? Am I going out to start my car even though it's not really that cold? Things like that I'm just conscious of that begin with our practice. Just our sitting practice kind of came for us. And then Bill brought up a great point, was how do we show reverence for life for the people that we don't like? That government that's screwing up the planet really bad. That's part of reverence for life too. And I don't want to practice that part of reverence for life. I mean, there's ways that we can actually change that system, but there's people out there that love that, love that guy. How do I have reverence for their lives? That's a challenge on a daily basis. And when Bill brought that up, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of sticky.
But you don't have to agree with them. I mean,
no, you don't have
reverence for them.
Right.
Cherish them because they're a human being, I guess, after all.
And sometimes you just feel sorry for it.
Well, I'd say Milarepa did it for the hunter.
Yeah, I think you can feel anger toward people and still have reverence. But I think the actions that they're engaged in is harming people, and that the natural human reaction to that is anger. And the best way to respond to that anger is to do something positive. And by not tolerating that, you're actually showing compassion for that person. By taking action against that person. And not against that person, but what they're doing. You're actually saving them as well as yourself. And that was a comment that that social justice person that wrote that book, he was here. He was a Lama.
Is that Nicole? I'm sure.
No, it's Lama. He's African American.
Yeah, Lama.
Yeah, he talked a lot about that. I brought that up. What about anger? And he said, oh yeah, it's very consistent with Buddhism to be angry. But then you, out of love, you act on that anger in a positive way to change whatever the injustice is that's going on. You don't try to harm that person, but you do take some sort of an action that's going to change things in a positive direction. That's why I feel sometimes I find this a lot in environmental groups. There's a hesitancy to confront the government aspect of this, the political aspect of it, and put more emphasis on our private lives and planting trees and stuff. I think you have to take some political action. That has to be part of the equation. We can't avoid it. Every day I get up in the morning and I dread what I'm going to hear on the news. But I listen to the news because I have to know what's going on in order to take action and to regulate my own feelings of anger and to deal with those feelings, not avoid them. And I feel like Trump and the political situation right now, I try to convince myself and see that this is a gift for me. Because I've had to confront things about myself that if this man wasn't around and this political situation wasn't around right now, I would never have to face. But now I'm having to face an aspect of myself that I've never had to face before in my life. So it's a gift in a way. But that doesn't mean, and it would not be a gift if I avoided it and just didn't watch TV, just live my life. I'm comfortable right now. I don't have to pay attention to anything. I'm retired. I have a comfortable life. I could just ignore everything. But I made it a point. I'm going to take action. And I've become very politically active because of my commitment. I really feel that's important. the political aspect of it. And it's good to do all these other things, yes, I agree. But not to avoid the political aspect. We're not going to solve it without the politics.
I think that's, as we begin to look at moving towards our final weeks together, those are some of the things that we're talking about as a Sangha. The actions that we are going to take as a collective body. Want to be Bodhisattva.
I just wanted to share really quick too, just a kind of a correlation story. So in my other job, I worked with individuals with intellectual disabilities, and sometimes when they can't express themselves correctly, they get violent or they'll get loud and have negative behaviors. And we've always been taught, don't see that individual as a negative, see their behavior as a negative. And there's a system that we're trained in called MANT, and it's basically if they are hitting someone else, a way to restrain them that is non-harming. So instead of like doing some police tactic where you take somebody to the ground, you actually restrain them that looks more like a hug, that you're preventing them from harming themselves and others until their behavior calms down, and then you release, and the restraint is done in such a way that it doesn't really harm them, it maybe frustrates them. And I've always likened that kind of process to Buddhism and how it is to react to negativity in the world. That when Milarepa didn't see the hunter as bad, he saw the hunter's actions as bad. And so instead of hiding from the hunter, instead of not addressing what the hunter was presenting, instead Milarepa took that and then used compassionate action through a song to then tame and in a sense restrain that hunter's mind, so that the hunter then came out of that cyclic mindset to then arise in a compassionate way and become a student. So I really do feel like that's such a great example, whether it's politics on a national level, politics on a city level. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I would like to have changed in the city, that could be improved on. Not just at the national level too, but even in our own selves and those that we deal with, we're going to be approached and encounter negativity. And how do we as budding bodhisattvas address that? And I think that's really what the story of Milarepa demonstrates in so many levels. So yeah, I just wanted to end with that part. So.
That's good.
But there is an election coming up. Pay attention to what people are saying, and then vote for the right person.
Perform your civic duty. So next week, our section is nature as teacher or refuge.
Yep.
And do you know who our teacher is?
Yep, so Nora is going to be giving the Dharma talk Sunday. And then One Truth, Countless Teachings, correct, Nora?
Yes.
Which is on page 49 is the essay or the writing that we're pulling from. The Huayan Sutra, I believe is how it's pronounced. Yep. So, again, love to have you here on Sunday to listen to Nora's Dharma talk and show her some love. And I think this will be your first Dharma talk, right? No, you've done other Dharma talks before. Yeah. So yeah, show up, show Nora some love and support, and then we'll have that on our podcast for the Monday email that will go out, and there'll be a link in there as well. And so everybody has the book. Just want to make sure everybody has the text
or get drawdown.
Yeah, I would actually recommend the drawdown, especially for like actionable steps and stuff like that. That drawdown book is a really great resource, both globally and locally. It's things that the world could be doing, and then things that yourself can be doing. It's
jam-packed.
And it's got great pictures. That's what I really love about it.
Yes.
So, okay, we're going to close with the dedication.